morning we're back in Matthew chapter number 10. As we continue on looking at the principles for discipleship. Now, last week we started to look at the second principle I believe that an effective disciple maker needs to adopt in order to make disciples. And that is, we need to have a clear focus. We've seen that discipleship is marked by a divine commission and secondly, a clear focus. Jesus instructed the disciples and gave them a clear focus in verse number 5. Matthew records these 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, "Do not go on a road to Gentiles and do not enter a city of Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven has come near." Now Jesus was about to send the disciples out on their first missionary run. If you like, this was the trial run. This is the one where they're going to get a bit of a taste of what was to come for them. They still had the training wheels on. They weren't ready to go solo. Now, to ensure maximum success, Jesus gave them a clear focus. And he did that by removing distractions, by setting a target, and by simplifying the message. He told them, do not go to the Gentiles. Do not go to the Samaritans. He removed any distractions. He said, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He set the target. And then he simplified the message by telling them, preach, the kingdom of heaven has come near. By setting a clear focus, by removing the distractions, by setting the target, by simplifying the message, Jesus took the complexity out of disciple making. And I believe this is significant because we live in a time when people crave simplicity. People's lives have become so complicated. People are under all sorts of pressures, all sorts of time pressures, and they are hungry for simple. And I believe we should be a church that moves from a discipleship program to a discipleship pathway. A pathway that is clear, that is focused, and above all, is simple. A pathway that leads people from the community into the core of this church family. If you look at Jesus' ministry, you can summarize this approach in 3 phases. He brought them in, he built them up, and then he sent them out. With these 3 simple steps implemented over 3 years, Jesus changed the world. This morning I want us to consider the first step in a little bit more depth, the bringing them in. I want us to see how we can bring people in and begin that discipleship making program. Making disciples at the end of the day has always been about reaching people. It's about connecting with people. Jesus started a movement by reaching people who were far from God. He connected with people that were pre-Christian, unchurched, lost, whatever label you want to put on them. Jesus went after these people. He sought them out. And he invited them to follow him so that he could make them fishers of men. Jesus reached his disciples through personal relationships. And folks, if you get nothing else out of this morning's message, get this. We will reach people through personal relationships. We will make disciples through personal relationships. We connect with other people through personal relationships. We see through the Gospels that Jesus connected with his disciples. and invited them to come and see what he was about. He connected with them on a relational basis before he did any miracles, before he did any real teaching. You cannot have a pathway to discipleship without connecting with pre-Christians and bringing them in. And I kind of like that term, pre-Christians. I was reading an article and the guy used that. And I was thinking, like, it's better than calling them the lost. You know, they're just pre-Christians. They're just not quite Christians yet. Therefore, a disciple-making church ought to be a place that is continually connecting with the unchurched. The Bible shares several accounts where disciples were made through relationships. As people connected with those that did not know about this man called Jesus. In John chapter number 1, it says, one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, we have found the Messiah, which has been interpreted the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Here is one of the classic scriptures that are used to, reinforce this idea of making disciples through relationships. The first thing Andrew did after spending time with Jesus was he went and found his brother so he could tell him about Jesus. And then Andrew brought Simon Peter to meet Jesus. Later on in the same chapter, a few verses on, Philip does the same thing with his friend Nathanael. Who did he find? Well, Andrew found his brother. Nathanael found his friend. He found him, he told him about Jesus, and he brought him to meet him. Then in John chapter 4, Jesus has a conversation with a woman by the well in Samaria. She runs back to her village, finds her neighbors, and tells them about Jesus. Not only does she go back to find her neighbors and tell them about Jesus, but then she brings them all to meet him. So here we have an example of a brother, a friend, and a neighbor. Each of them found by someone they knew, someone they loved, who told them what they had seen, what they had heard, who told them all about this man called Jesus. And then they brought him or them, brother, friend, or neighbor, to meet him. We could sum this up by find, tell, bring. Jesus brought them in, built them up, and sent them out. These discipleship makers found them, told them, and brought them. Found someone they loved. Could be a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a co-worker. But it is someone you know, someone you love, and someone that trusts you. Tell them what you know. And I really want you to get that. Tell them what you know. Tell them what Jesus has done in your life. Tell them what Jesus is doing in your life. Tell them about God's love as you understand it. Tell them about God's love as you've experienced it. Tell them about the forgiveness of sins as you know it and as you have experienced it. Tell them the difference between religion and the gospel. Tell them it's not about doing, it's about the fact that it's been done. It's not what we do for God, it's what God has done for us. It's what Jesus has done for us, what he's done that we could never do for ourselves. Tell them about God and his abundant life with their name on it. Tell them what you know. Then bring them to church. Invite them to come with you and let them experience the Christian community. This Christian community. It could be a weekend service. It could be one of our special services, like the Friends and Family service that is coming up, which some of you don't know about yet, but now you kind of do. We'll give you a bit more detail at the end. People who find Jesus in the context of a Christian community tend to get connected and stay and grow. We are here to partner with you and help you and your friends and your family and your neighbors and your co-workers and whoever it is that you bring in to connect with Jesus. Again, a simple approach and one that is similar to Jesus' method of bring, build, and send. Simple, but effective. So how do we bring them in? It starts with friendships. It starts with relationships. It starts with making connections with other people. People follow Jesus because of friends or family members. I want you to think about that. Peter came to Jesus because of his brother. And look at the impact that had. You know? Church history shows the gospel traveled along relational lines. It spread from person to person through relational networks. Studies have been done, and they all indicate that more than 90% of those who follow Jesus do it because of the influence of a trusted friend or a trusted family member. Our own experience confirms this. The history of this church family confirms this. We've tried many different things to help people find and follow Jesus, but the one that works consistently is friendship evangelism. Friends sharing with friends. Look at the family members that are here, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, and friends. Even the Bible confirms this. But what if everyone you're close to is already a Christian? Then we need to remind ourselves that discipleship starts with friendships. And there are some principles that we can follow to help us in this endeavor. First one is we need to focus on building deep relationships, new relationships. We need to look at making new connections. Because many of us have been Christians for more than 2 years. And we have few relationships with pre-Christian people. Not because we don't like them, it's just that we don't share a lot in common. You know, they're going off to the beach in the summertime on a Sunday, and we're going to church. You know, sometimes your boats don't meet. Our social circles change. Our social circles have either been converted or diminished because we don't share a lot in common with our non-Christian brethren. And they go off and do their thing and they leave you to do your thing. And so our social circles now are pretty much reserved for Christians. Well, if that's the case, I know I've got some good news. There is an answer. And that is that we need to be intentional about building new friendships and creating new social circles of influence. In other words, if we don't have a lot of Christian friends, we need to start making some. And we need to be intentional about it. You see, what your unbelieving or unchurched friends or your pre-Christian friends, as I like to call them now, what they're desperately searching for is God's unconditional love, flowing through someone just like you in the context of friendship. The world we live in is strong on communication. I mean, you can contact one another on about 50 different apps to get a hold of one another. We're big on communication. You know? The young ones, they go back to when we were teenagers, you just had the landline, that old rotary phone. That was the main form of communication. Other than that, it was write a letter. But, nowadays, you can get a hold of anybody 50 different ways. We are big on communication. But the inverse of that, or the I guess one of the results of that, is we've become bad at relationships. We're weak with making physical connections, deep relationships. We're living in an age of unlimited access to knowledge and communication, but it is also true that we're living in a time when people are extremely lonely and long for true and meaningful relationships. So we need to be a friend that cares for your lost friend. We need to care. We need to be real. We need to be authentic, and allow our lost friends to see Christ in us, even if we don't consider ourselves to be spiritual giants. We need to build authentic friendships with our pre-Christian friends, and I want to emphasize the word authentic, because people can sniff a fake a mile away. If they think you have an agenda, or you're treating them like a project, another notch to put on your discipleship belt, it'll be over before it even begins. Don't be that kind of friend. Be a real friend. Be a true friend. Be the kind of friend, or the kind of Christian friend, that the unchurched has never met before. Here's point number 2. You might have heard this somewhere before. Most Christians are willing to serve the unchurched, but would never ask the unchurched to serve them in some way in order to build a genuine friendship, because of this thing called pride. And as Kiwis, you might have heard, we suffer from this thing called pride. But I like what Dave had to say, because Dave's really illustrated this point beautifully for me. Dave's built a relationship with his neighbor and allowing him to serve him and creating a genuine friendship, genuine relationship, a genuine, authentic connection that at the right time can be used to share about Jesus. And he's already started doing it. He's already talking about, the Bible says, the laborer is worthy of his hire. It's planting seeds. It's laying the groundwork. Love it. Real friends show their weakness and are humble enough to ask for help. Some people that you want a genuine friendship, show people that you want a genuine friendship, one that is characterized by bi-directional servanthood. In other words, as Christians, we have no problem serving our friends. No problem whatsoever. But how about being a little bit humble and let them come and help you? Be vulnerable. Be weak. Ring them up and say, I got to do this on my car and I ain't got a clue. Can you please come help? Ask them to teach you something, to get a task accomplished around your house, or help you work on a weak area in your life. We are always looking to be of service to our friends, but we need to allow them to be service to us, because that's how real relationships are built, leaning on one another. Here's the problem. I'm asking you to build genuine, real, authentic relationships without an agenda, yet everything I'm asking you to do sounds like an agenda, We're looking to build relationships with people and build friendships with the goal of sharing Jesus with our friends. But here's the thing. I want my friends to know Jesus, but people only receive Jesus from those they trust. And the first point, I keep emphasizing that word, trust. So we kind of have a bit of a chicken and egg situation. People will only trust those that they have relationships with. We can't get them to trust us unless we have the relationship. So it's kind of like chicken and egg. So how do I rationalize it? How do we rationalize it? By being a trustworthy friend, by being an authentic friend, by being a real friend. Be interested in them as a person, not as a project. Be the kind of Christian the unchurched have never met before. Because if you're like that, then you'll be the best friend I've ever had. Be a trustworthy friend and be committed to loving them no matter what, whether they come to Jesus or not. And that's the bottom line. When we go into the relationship, when we go into the friendship, when we go to make the connections, we're going with the idea of this is a person I want to see get saved. This is the person I care about. But I'm going to be a true friend. I'm going to be a real friend. I'm going to be an authentic friend, and I will love them, and I will be committed to them, whether they get saved or not. Be a friend that cares, and your lost friends will see Christ in you, even if you don't consider yourself to be a spiritual giant. And understand it. It might not be you that leads them to the Lord, but maybe it's the rest of the Christian community. We need to find, we need to tell, and then we need to bring. Thirdly, avoid duplicity. It's important to speak to your Christian friends and your pre-Christian friends about the same things and in the same way. Don't be one way to one group and one way to another. Don't speak to this group in one way and then a different way to the other group. See, some Christians share the spiritual things with other Christians, but not with their unchurched or unbelieving friends. They think my lost friends just won't understand. And there's some truth in that. So I won't talk about my spiritual struggles, my spiritual victories, the spiritual truths that I've learned, the spiritual blessings that I've experienced. Now, this may sound like common sense, but it doesn't draw the unchurched to Christ through you. To see a friend come to Jesus, you must speak to the person about the things of God. When you openly share how you and God relate to one another, your lost friend will quickly see a spiritual contrast between their perception of God and your relationship with God through Christ. Because isn't that what we want them to do? Is come to Jesus? And if we don't speak about Jesus, if we're not sharing about what's going on in our relationship with Jesus, how are they going to see the difference? Because what do they see in the media? Christians are bigoted, arrogant, prideful, loonies, And how do they see God? As this aloof, spiritual, something in the sky? Is that the God you serve? Is that who you are? We can all be those things in our lives, but I think overall, the world's perception of God, Christianity, is wrong. But how are they going to know that if they don't see the difference? If they don't see the alternative? Now, I get it. They're not going to understand everything. But plant some seeds. They'll germinate later on at the right time. God will see to them. They'll get watered and they'll grow. Here's a good one. This one is for you, Dan. Give and take refrigerator rights with your unchurched friends. Okay? Many Christians claim to have friendships with the lost, but they really have that person in their home. They really spend time in the home of the lost person. This is my pre-Christian friend. This is my lost friend. But we only meet once in a blue moon at the rugby over here, you know. If you want to legitimize a friendship, invite your lost friend to your house frequently enough for them to freely take refrigerator rights. In other words, they come in, how's it going, Jeff? Straight to the fridge. Have you got a Coke or is there a sandwich? You know? So they don't feel like a guest, they feel like part of the family. And when reciprocated, when you can go to their house and say, hey, how's it going? And head straight for the fridge, then you know you've got this authentic relationship going on. This is the depth of friendship required to reach someone for Christ with relational evangelism. Folks, if you think you're too busy for this, then I would challenge you to rethink your priorities. Being too busy to relate to others is not Christ-like. Jesus spent a lot of quality time with people. How do you build these authentic relationships without it? Without spending time. If we're going to spend time building relationships with people, the best way to do it is to barbecue. Now, come on, we're Kiwis. We love a good barbecue. Folks, if we're going to build authentic relationships and get them to the point where you've got these refrigerator rights, you'll do it over a barbecue. And it doesn't have to be a literal barbecue. It's a catch-all phrase. It means do something fun together. Do something that each of you enjoy. And once again, Jesus is our model. In Luke 19, Luke tells the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. Jesus is passing through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem, where he would give his life for us. He saw Zacchaeus up a tree, because we all know he was he's a wee man. Is that how the song goes? And so he climbed up a tree to see Jesus. And Jesus says, Zacchaeus, come down. I must be a guest in your house today. Now, Jesus is the Son of God, okay? So he can say, hey, I'm coming to your house for tea. And you go, yes, Jesus, okay. Okay? Might not always work for us. So you might want to wait a little bit before you start inviting yourself over to other people's places for dinner. But Jesus invited himself to dinner. He barbecued first. Even though everyone in the town began to grumble because Zacchaeus was a sinner, he was a tax collector, Jesus still said, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house for tea. As a tax collector, that made him a traitor, a cheat, but it also made him filthy rich. And that combination made him the most hated man in town. But Jesus chose the worst sinner in town, invited himself to a barbecue, and everyone was scandalized. Everyone except Zacchaeus. He welcomed Jesus, and because of their time together over a shared meal, he became saved. He repented, and he promised to repay anybody he had cheated and to be generous to the poor. Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house. Now, usually people don't get saved at the first barbecue. Usually. But sometimes love works fast. Sometimes it's fast and sometimes it's slow. But folks, the relationships begin with the barbecue first. The other scriptures are about when Jesus called Matthew. What's the first thing Matthew did when he met Jesus? He threw a party and he invited his friends. He barbecued first. Matthew, like Zacchaeus, was a tax collector. Who do you suppose are a tax collector's friends? Other tax collectors. It's like accountants, you know. Who are the accountants' friends? There's other accountants. And assorted other notorious sinners. No, I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I love accountants. Matthew knew that that if he wanted his friends to follow Jesus, then he needed barbecue first. So he threw a party and invited Jesus to the party. We're not told if many or any of them started following Jesus, but Matthew started at the right place. He barbecued first. So throw a party. Get together. Have some fun. And there are many ways to do it. Have a games night. Eat together. Watch sport or a movie. Eat together. Share a hobby. Play golf. Photography. Scrapbooking. Motorcycles. Gardening. Eat together. Help them with a project around the home, on the car. Or ask them to help you. Eat together. Have fun. Be friends. Eat together. Whatever you do, barbecue first. So Jesus modeled for discipleship is to bring them in, build them up, and send them out. This morning we've looked at how we can bring them in. How we can bring them in, how we can find them, and it all starts with friendship. Like Jesus, we reach pre-Christians through personal relationships. We need to connect with them and invite them to come and see what Jesus is all about. Build an authentic friendship with them. Friendships that are genuine and intimate. Barbecue first. Look for areas of commonality that you can share. You know, maybe you're a hunter. Maybe you're a fisherman. You know, whatever you like that they like, go do it. But spend time so that the relationship can be built. Bringing them in starts with friendship. Barbecue first. Build authentic relationships and see what God can do. Thank you this morning.